So we have Jitka, who has joined us, and who will tell you something very important about quality control. So now you know how to run the analysis, but it is very important to check some steps, because especially with this kind of patients, there are issues with normalization and statistical comparison for what concerns the masking part that really have to be taken care of. So I will let Jitka introduce herself.
Yes, hello everyone, my name is Jitka. I am a postdoctoral researcher in the Coma Science Group, and I mainly use neuroimaging to assess different brain states and different states of consciousness. So I will today briefly first present you the quality control, as Ariana said, and after that I will also show you some clinical cases of patients that we have seen and how to interpret the results of those SUV and SPM maps. I'm just trying to share my screen, but it doesn't show up as an option to share my... Yes, but now it's there. Okay. So I have a new MacBook, the M1 chip, and I think maybe some of you as well, and then you have problems like this and with SPM as well. So yes, anyway, it's there. So quality control for the FDG-PET studies. As Estelle already told you, the first step to control the quality of your data is to make sure that the acquisition is done in a proper way. So you make sure that there are no confounding factors. That means that the glycemia of the patient is okay, and that the patient doesn't suffer from, for example, diabetes. And if so, be extra careful that the glycemia is below 120. Also, you need to make sure that the patient is aroused. That means the patient is awake, and if possible, with the least possible stimulations. So you make sure that the room is dark, so that you don't see big activations of or big uptake in the visual cortex specifically, and you only stimulate the patient to make sure that the patient is awake when he or she seems sleeping. Also know that although it is very rare, but neural inflammation might also bias the glucose uptake, right? If you see a lot of inflammatory tissue, then you will have the you might think that the glucose uptake is relatively high, but it's mostly because of bacteria and inflammatory tissue. So this is a confounding factor as well, just for you to know. So make sure to follow the right protocol for data acquisition, as Estelle already said. And if you have any doubts, you can always refer to the paper that of Boulard that I cite here below, as he's a real reference on FDG-PET data acquisition. So given that all this went well, you want to know how to analyze the data, right? So what check should you do to make sure that we can trust our results? So for the single subject analysis, it's important that you have a healthy control group. And as Claire also already mentioned, probably, it is important that the healthy control group is large enough, so at least 20 subjects, but also that they are acquired on the same scanner, because there are a lot of variability in scanners, and that might induce some bias. However, sometimes some centers do not have a healthy control group. And for that reason, we do share our healthy control data so that you can use our healthy control group to do the analysis for your patients. But still, if that's the case, please try to convince the heads of the institutions or the hospitals where you're working to acquire a healthy control group, because it's really important for the interpretation of the results that you have a healthy control group on the same scanner. But then something that you can control better by yourself is the segmentation of the gray and white matter in SPM. So you want to make sure that the map that you obtain, or the mask, includes all the gray matter voxels. So this I will show you, of course, also an example later on, but a few examples actually. But just know that sometimes for your single subject analysis, it might not be possible to have the perfect mask. And that is that is okay, but it's important for you to know what it means for your analysis, right? So it means that if the gray matter is not completely included in this gray matter mask, then your voxels that are excluded from the mask will also not be part of the SPM analysis. So the general linear model will not be estimated in regions that are outside of the mask. So in the case of patients with a severe brain injury or disorders of consciousness, this probably means that you will underestimate the hypometabolic areas. And for a group analysis, it's really important to have, again, this healthy control group that was acquired on the same scanner. And also there you make sure that you exclude patients with the bad mask. So here on the right side, you see the raw data on top, the raw uptake images, and you see that there is, of course, this is a healthy control and it all went well. There's a lot of uptake across the whole gray matter, and also the mask looks really good, right? It covers the whole gray matter, and therefore SPM will also do the statistics on the whole gray matter. However, if you look here, you see the data for 2 patients. So again, on the left side, we see the raw data. On the right side, we see the mask. And both of these patients, they had severe brain injury, severe lesions that affects their uptake. Basically, for the top patient in the whole left hemisphere, and for the bottom patients, you see this lesion mostly in the frontal cortex. If you then look at the masks, you see that there is this part missing. And also for the bottom patient, you see that the frontal cortex is missing. And this is something, as I said before, that you might not be able to avoid in your single subject analysis, because it also reflects the fact that there is this lesion, of course, in the patient. But these masks, if you include them in your group analysis, might influence the mask of the group analysis and introduce, let's say, lesions or areas where the GLM will not be estimated. So then we look at the normalization. On the left side here, you see the MNI template. Then next to that, you see the FDG-PET image in native space. Then you see a normalized PET image. And yeah, from the PET image in native space to the normalized image, you see that there is, of course, a resizing of the brain to fit the template. And also you see that there are small changes to make it fit well. And indeed, the normalized PET image looks pretty much like the template, especially after smoothing, which is also performed for the template. But then if we look at the patient below, you see that this PET image in native space, you see already that there is a huge lesion. So there is a big craniectomy, and the brain is kind of pushed outwards of the place where it used to be in a healthy volunteer. And there the normalization just doesn't work so well. So normalization cannot converge to a good solution, and that is indeed reflected in this image, also in the smoothed image. So this is a subject, that for which the normalization didn't work perfectly, and you would probably exclude such a patient from your analysis, at least your group level analysis. Here I have a small overview of several patients' normalized images. And you can take a couple of seconds to have a look which patients you think should be excluded from a group analysis. It's probably not so hard, right? There are actually quite a few, as you know. There are a lot of lesions and damages in the brains of most patients with disorders of consciousness. So yeah, it's pretty common to have a normalization that is not perfect, at least for a group analysis. So here I point towards 3 of them, but you might probably carefully consider every single patient before including in your group analysis. So again, about the group analysis, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about why, or maybe a bit more clearly about why you should not include any subject in the analysis, only with a good normalization and a good mask. And to to make sure that you check if you actually manage to select the right patients, you should check several parameters in your SPM model. So the first of them is the mask image, as I said before. So you need to make sure that all the gray matter voxels are considered in the mask, and that that it looks like the brain volume. The second image is the RPV image. So this is this reflects the independent resolution elements, and it kind of gives you an idea of the smoothness of the signal. So when you have a normal brain, the uptake will be relatively smooth across the brain, right? Only in places like the brainstem or the ventricles, you see a big change from one voxel to the next voxel. But in case of the absence of lesions, then you should see a relatively smooth image that covers all the brain tissue. And last, you should check the ESS image, that is the unexplained variance in the model. And that's an important parameter to see how well your GLM actually fits the presented data. So if it fits the data well, then it should be relatively low, and it should also be, again, smooth across the brain, so that your model explains the data of the whole gray matter equally well, or almost equally well, and that there are no big gaps or changes. And so, yeah, now I'm pretty sure you know that the lesions will negatively affect your GLM model, and for group analysis, you should avoid that. So in case of doubt, I would suggest that you contact an experienced SPM user or developer for help. And in our case, I would like to say thanks to Christophe Philips and Mohamed Alibari, who both helped us in the past and future for SPM analysis of patients with disorders of consciousness. So thank you for your attention. And if there's any questions, then I'm happy to try and answer them. I didn't see, wait. Is it possible to simply reuse the same healthy? Yes, so you can definitely reuse the same healthy control group for different studies, especially if they are in the right age range. Then, oh yeah, so the question is if it is possible to reuse the healthy control groups for all studies that are performed in a specific center, and that would, of course, reduce the number of people that need to receive a dose of a radioactive compound. And indeed, that's of course possible. There's no problem in reusing healthy control data for different studies, especially if they have the right age range. So yeah, I would definitely recommend to have one healthy control group per center, and that can be useful for all your FDG-PET studies in the center.